I will always think there was something I could have done differently. My one job was to look out for her, and that has not happened. And I'm going to keep looking out for her now as best I can. I don't have a wife.
Let me tell you what happened in the span of roughly 24 hours in this case, because once I lay it out, I want you to sit with it and tell me what you think. On Monday, April 13th, 2026, Brian Hooker walked out of the Central Police Station in Grand Bahama. He had spent 5 days in custody as a suspect in his wife Lynette's disappearance. He had not been charged. He had denied everything. And the moment his feet hit the pavement outside that station, he turned to the cameras and gave the world exactly what it needed to hear. He was not going anywhere. He said his sole focus was getting back on the water, that he planned to hire or beg people to help him search. He told NBC News that the 10 days without Lynette had been the longest he had ever been apart from her in their 25 years together. He said he was not really capable of just turning away from this. That was a Tuesday. By Wednesday, his attorney was on the phone with reporters confirming that Brian Hooker had boarded a commercial flight and left the Bahamas. He was gone. Now, before anyone watching this jumps to conclusions, I want to be very clear about something. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. He remains a suspect in an active investigation by both the Royal Bahamas Police Force and the U.S. Coast Guard, which has opened its own separate criminal probe. But he is denied any wrongdoing, and nothing has been proven against him in a court of law. What we are here to do today is not convict anyone. We are here to examine what is publicly known, what was said on the record, and what questions those statements raise. Because those questions matter. And the question at the center of this video is one that nobody who has been following this case can stop asking. If your wife is still missing, still out there, in your words, why did you get on a plane? Please subscribe to our news channel. It helps us reach our 1,000 subscribers goal. And please let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Here is what we know. Here is what is on the record, and here is where the story gets complicated. Hours after Brian Hooker was released from custody on Monday night, he sat down for back-to-back interviews with multiple major news networks. Keep in mind what this man had just been through. 5 days of questioning as a suspect, at one point asked specifically about whether he had caused harm that resulted in his wife's death. That is what he walked out of. And yet, here he was, on camera, making his position clear in language that left no room for ambiguity. To NBC News, I want people to know that Lynette is my life, and we have been together almost half my life, and we belong to each other, and I mean to keep looking. To CBS News, I won't be able to stop looking. Someone with more authority is going to have to tell me to stop. To ABC News on Tuesday morning, his only focus was to get back on the boat and then, quote, hire or beg people to help me go find some areas to search. And his own attorney reinforced this in a formal written statement, not an off-the-cuff comment, a prepared statement that said Brian Hooker would not be doing any further media interviews because he was, quote, dedicating his full emotional and physical energy toward coordinating with relevant parties to find her. That statement was dated Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, the same attorney was on the phone with NBC News confirming that Brian Hooker had boarded a commercial flight and left the country. From the moment that written statement was released to the moment he was gone, less than 24 hours. Now, there is an explanation. His attorney gave one. The statement read, following his release from custody without charge, Mr. Hooker is now facing another emergency. In addition to the trauma of his wife of 25 years being missing, Mr. Hooker has received urgent word of his mother's grave illness. He has traveled to the United States of America to be at her bedside during this critical time. Police were informed of his departure. His destination was not disclosed. Taken by itself, a man's mother is gravely ill and he goes to her. That is not a scandal. That is a son. Most people watching this right now would do the same thing. I would. But here is where it breaks open, because Lynette Hooker's daughter, Karli Aylesworth, went on the record with something that reframes the entire narrative around that explanation. She told reporters that Brian's mother's kidney failure was not new. This was not a sudden, unexpected medical crisis that arrived the morning after his release. It was an ongoing condition, one the family was already aware of. Which means the word urgent in that attorney's statement is doing a very specific job. And whether it's doing that job accurately is a question this family is openly asking. Was it a genuine emergency that left him no choice? Or was it, as Karli and her family have publicly suggested, a reason that was available and convenient and used? We are not going to answer that for you. We cannot. What we can tell you is that the family has a clear and stated position on it, and they have not been even slightly quiet about what they think. Karli Aylesworth is Lynette Hooker's daughter. She has known Brian Hooker since she was 4 years old. For 25 years, he has been the man in her mother's life. And since April 5th, the morning she received a phone call telling her that her mother was missing, she has been one of the most vocal, most consistent voices demanding answers in this case. When word broke that Brian had left the Bahamas, Karli did not hold back. She went on the record with multiple outlets, and what she said was not a polished statement filtered through a publicist. It was raw. She told the New York Post, "I think it shows his character. He somehow lost my mom at sea and cries on camera saying he'll never stop searching, then leaves the next day." To CBS News, she put it even more plainly. Brian Hooker leaving the Bahamas, she said, shows he's not much of a man of his word. 6 words. No legal argument, no forensic analysis, just the blunt, public verdict of a daughter who has been watching this unfold and has not spoken to her stepfather since he called to tell her that her mother was gone. And that detail itself is worth pausing on. Karli Aylesworth told reporters that from the moment Brian called her with the news of her mother's disappearance, a phone call she described as delivered matter of fact, like he was relaying a minor inconvenience, she has not spoken to him again, not once. She said she does not feel comfortable speaking to him until I find out more information on what happened to my mom. Now, Brian's attorney has denied the allegations Karli has raised about the nature of her mother and stepfather's relationship. She has said her client categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing, and that includes the allegations Karli has made. Brian has maintained that position consistently throughout this entire ordeal. But here is what makes Karli's response to his departure so powerful, journalistically and humanly. It's not about allegations. It's about something simpler. She is not saying he is guilty of anything. She is saying he made a promise, publicly, on camera to multiple news organizations, and he broke it within hours. And then, in what can only be described as a striking inversion, as Brian was boarding that flight out of the Bahamas, Karli was boarding a flight in. On Thursday, April 16th, Karli Aylesworth and her boyfriend Steve Hansen landed at the airport in Marsh Harbor, Bahamas. They were met by police upon arrival, and then they did what they came to do. They started retracing the route that Lynette and Brian had taken on the night of April 4th, the route that Brian says ended with his wife falling into the ocean. The husband left, the daughter arrived, and the search continued, carried now in part by a young woman who flew across the ocean because she refuses to accept that her mother's story is over. A family relative who spoke to reporters anonymously offered a perspective on the timing of Brian's departure that I think deserves to be heard, not as fact, but as context. The relative said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that while Brian gets to go be with his dying mother, Karli does not have that chance with Lynette. She may never have that chance. And that asymmetry, that one family member gets closure and the other doesn't, is something the Hooker family is sitting with right now. The same relative also said something that speaks to the longer arc of this family's fears. They said that for a period, Brian and Lynette had tried to get sober, that they had been doing better, but that about a year ago they started drinking again, and that this, the drinking, the volatility that reportedly came with it, gave them what the relative called a gut feeling that something terrible would eventually happen. They said, and I want to be precise here because these are serious words, part of us knew that he was probably going to keep hurting her physically and emotionally. I have to be careful here, and I will be. These are the words of a family member, not verified in a court of law, not established as fact. Brian Hooker has denied all allegations of wrongdoing, but they are on the record, and they are part of the story that Karli Aylesworth is carrying with her as she searches the same waters where her mother disappeared. When Brian Hooker walked out of the Central Police Station on Monday evening, he did not speak to reporters. His attorney spoke. He kept his head down, stayed close to his legal team, and was described as emotional. But body language experts and former investigators who watched the footage were paying attention to more than his words. They were watching how he moved, and what they said is worth putting on the table. Body language expert Susan Constantine, speaking to Fox News Digital, said that Brian Hooker's demeanor following his release stood out to her for one primary reason. There was very little of it. She described him as showing almost no expression in his body movement, not gesturing, not moving with urgency, not exhibiting any of the physical restlessness you might expect from a man whose wife is still missing somewhere in the open ocean. Constantine said, "If you didn't know the situation, you might think he was walking into a business meeting." She used the phrase, "no sense of urgency," and clarified, to her credit, that this alone does not mean anything definitive. It could, she said, be someone who is genuinely trying to project innocence. Grief manifests differently in different people. Some people go numb. Some people go silent. Some people are described by their closest friends and family as completely different from how they normally present and still be telling the absolute truth. But here is the thing. Karli said something that echoes this expert's observation, and she said it before she ever saw the body language analysis. She told reporters that the way Brian spoke on the phone when he called to tell her her mother was missing felt wrong to her. Not just the words, the delivery. She described it as matter of fact. Her boyfriend, Steve Hansen, who was with her when the call came in, described Brian's voice on that call as very monotone. And Karli, who has known Brian Hooker for her entire life, said it was strange specifically because he is not a monotone guy. Now I want to pause on this and say something clearly. Grief is not a performance. People respond to trauma in wildly different ways. Some people go flat. Some people dissociate. Shock can make a person sound robotic. We have all seen situations where someone has been unfairly judged for not crying visibly enough, not being emotional enough, not performing grief in the way that an audience expects. I am not telling you what to conclude from Karli's observation or the body language expert's analysis. What I am telling you is these observations exist. They are on the record. And the people closest to Lynette Hooker, the people who knew both of them, say that what they saw felt wrong to them. Whether it is meaningful or explainable by the weight of the situation, that is something the investigators on this case are also presumably weighing. Here is something I want to make sure is crystal clear, because it matters enormously. Brian Hooker leaving the Bahamas does not mean this investigation has slowed down. If anything, the opposite is true. The Royal Bahamas Police Commissioner, Shanta Connells, was direct about this when she addressed the media following Brian's release. She confirmed that while no charges had been filed at that time, Brian Hooker remains a formal suspect. The decision not to charge was made in coordination with the Department of Public Prosecutions, which recommended that no charges be filed at this time, pending the outcome of further investigation. At this time. Those three words are doing a lot of work. What that means in plain language is that this is not over. The case is still open, the investigation is still active, and there is a parallel criminal investigation being conducted by the U.S. Coast Guard, a separate probe from what the Bahamian authorities are running, that is still ongoing as of the time this video was made. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force has confirmed that search and recovery operations are continuing. As of April 16th, the operations involve extensive shoreline patrols, sea patrols, aerial drone surveillance, and submersible drone operations. And in a significant development reported on April 16th, the same day Karli landed in the Bahamas, cadaver dogs from the U.S. Coast Guard were deployed to the search area. For those who may not be familiar with what that means in investigatory terms, cadaver dogs are trained specifically to detect human remains. Their deployment does not mean Lynette Hooker has been found. It does not mean authorities have given up hope of finding her alive. But it does signal something in the direction this search has moved since it transitioned from a rescue operation into what authorities have described as a recovery operation. That shift from rescue to recovery happened less than 2 weeks after she disappeared. Authorities made that determination based on the conditions, the timeline, and the available evidence. But it is worth noting that Brian Hooker himself refused to accept that framing. He told CBS News on Tuesday that he wants to believe she is still alive. He said that he had been told that people in the Bahamas have survived overboard incidents for days and even weeks. Whether that belief was genuine or performative is something we cannot and will not speculate about here. What is documented is that the man who said he believed she could still be alive was also the man who boarded a flight home the following morning. And as investigators continue their work on the ground, in the air and under the water, the question that started this video is still unanswered. Not answered by the evidence, not answered by Brian, not answered by his attorney. Why did he leave? I've been sitting with this case, and there's one thing I keep coming back to. Not the legal questions, not the forensics, not even the history between Brian and Lynette that her family has talked about publicly. It's something simpler. When Brian Hooker spoke to those cameras on Tuesday, April 14th, less than 48 hours before he left, he said something that I think cuts to the heart of what his departure means to the people who loved Lynette. He was asked by ABC News if there was anything he wished he had done differently, anything on the night his wife went overboard or in the days since, and he became emotional, and he said, my one job was to look out for her, and that has not happened, and I'm going to keep looking out for her now, the best I can." Those words hit differently now. Because the thing about making a promise like that, publicly, on camera to the entire country, is that it sets a standard. And when you don't meet it, people notice. Karli noticed. The family noticed. The internet noticed. And whatever the legal outcome of this investigation, that public promise and the very public way it was broken is something that will follow this story wherever it goes. I want to be fair to Brian Hooker one more time, because fairness is what we owe everyone in a situation like this. His mother is reportedly gravely ill. He is a man who has just spent 5 days in a foreign country's police custody as a suspect in his wife's disappearance. He has been through something that most of us will never experience, and leaving to be at a dying parent's bedside is not, in and of itself, evidence of anything. His attorney said he plans to return to the Bahamas. Whether that happens remains to be seen. But here is what I keep thinking about. There is a young woman, Karli Aylesworth, who instead of waiting for answers to come to her, got on a plane. She flew to a foreign country where she has no jurisdiction, no legal authority, and no power to compel anyone to tell her anything. She did it anyway. She landed in Marsh Harbor, she talked to police, and she started walking the same path her mother walked on the last night anyone can confirm she was seen alive. She did not wait for someone to bring her the truth. She went looking for it. And while she was doing that, the man who says Lynette is his life, the man who said his one job was to look out for her, was somewhere in the United States, destination undisclosed. I'm not going to tell you what to think about that. You already know what you think about that. Let me give you the factual picture as of the time this video was produced, because in a case that is moving this fast, the facts are what matter. Lynette Hooker, 55 of Michigan, has not been found. No body has been recovered. No confirmed evidence of her death has been publicly disclosed by authorities. She has been missing since the evening of April 4th, 2026. Brian Hooker, 58, has left the Bahamas. He has not been charged with any crime in connection with his wife's disappearance. He remains a formal suspect in the active investigation by the Royal Bahamas Police Force. He is also the subject of an ongoing U.S. Coast Guard criminal investigation. His attorney says he plans to return to the Bahamas. The search on the ground is continuing. As of April 16th, cadaver dogs have been deployed by the U.S. Coast Guard. Aerial drones, submersible drones, sea patrols, and shoreline operations are all ongoing according to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Karli Aylesworth is in the Bahamas. She arrived April 16th with her boyfriend, Steve Hansen. She has spoken to local police and is conducting her own parallel effort to find information about what happened to her mother. The U.S. State Department has confirmed it is aware of the case and is providing consular assistance while working with Bahamian officials. And somewhere in all of this is the truth about what happened on the evening of April 4th, when an 8-foot dinghy left Hopetown in the Bahamas carrying 2 people and reportedly returned with only 1. I cover a lot of true crime, and one of the things I've learned is that cases like this one, cases where there's no body, no charge, no arrest, no clear answer, are the ones that burrow into you, because they leave everything open. And open cases have a way of making everyone feel like a detective, and sometimes making everyone feel like a judge. I want to resist that impulse, and I want to encourage you to resist it too. Not because the questions aren't worth asking, but because the answers aren't ours to give yet. What we can say, what we have said in this video using only the verified, publicly reported record, is this. A man made a promise to keep searching for his wife. He made it on camera to multiple networks in words that were specific and unambiguous, and within 24 hours, he left. His attorney gave a reason. His stepdaughter questioned that reason. A relative of the family suggested the timing was suspicious, and none of those perspectives are legally conclusive. They are just perspectives from people who are living inside this story in ways that the rest of us are not. What I do know is that somewhere in the Bahamas, a search is still happening. Cadaver dogs are working shorelines. Drones are moving across the water. A daughter is asking questions because she refuses to accept silence as an answer. And investigators, both Bahamian and American, are building a case, fact by fact, piece by piece, in the way that real investigations actually work. This is not over, not even close. And when there is a meaningful update, when the investigation produces something concrete, we will be here, with the facts, with the context, and with the same standard we always try to hold ourselves to. No speculation, no sensationalism, and no rushing to a verdict before the evidence gets there first. Thank you for watching. I know this case is hard to sit with because there's no resolution yet, because Lynette Hooker is still out there, and her family is still waiting, and the investigation is still moving. If you have been following this from the beginning, I want to hear from you in the comments. What do you make of Brian Hooker leaving the Bahamas? And what questions do you still want answered before this case is closed? If this is your first time here, welcome. Subscribe so you don't miss the next update, because this one is moving fast. And to Lynette Hooker's family, to Karli, who flew to the Bahamas alone to find her mother, we see you, and we are still paying attention.